evening and welcome to the VC3 News Update for Wednesday, July 25th, 2023. I'm Shalisa Nanton. The COVID-19 pandemic was a debilitating development setback for this country, particularly as we pursue the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So said Economic and Planning Minister Camilo Gonsalves while delivering remarks at St. Vincent and the Grenadines Development Partners Coordination meeting held yesterday at the NIS conference room. Minister Gonsalves said this country over the last 3 years experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, a terrible drought, the volcanic eruptions of the Lassofer volcano in 2021, hurricane, and also a tropical storm, something not experienced by many other nations.
There are not many in that club. And each one of those challenges individually would have been debilitating. Collectively, it was a perfect storm of challenges to the common developmental aspirations of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And each of them has a lingering effect on where we are and where we plan to be in the near and medium term. And that's where we hope that all of you come in to be part of this joint and cooperative effort to not only dig us out of that hole, but set us on the path for future development.
The minister said despite those challenges from an economic perspective, this country did not do terribly relative to our neighbors because we are not too heavily dependent on tourism. Therefore, we did not have the level of economic contraction experienced by those heavily dependent on tourism when the COVID-19 pandemic struck.
The average in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, the average economic contraction as a result of COVID was 17%. And it would have been worse, but for the fact that we raised the average a bit, because our contraction was about 5%. There are countries to the north of us in the Eastern Caribbean who had contractions in excess of 20% of GDP as a result of COVID. But St. Vincent and the Grenadines never shut down. We continue to trade with our neighbors to the extent it was possible. We continue to have internal economic activity because we didn't have the specific days you could go to the supermarket and all of the other responses that took place elsewhere. And we don't depend as much on tourism arrival. So our contraction was severe, but relative to our neighbors, it was relatively shallow. Because of that, we were able to rebound from the COVID setback from an economic perspective more quickly than our neighbors were.
The finance minister said this country returned to 2019 to pre-COVID levels of GDP at the end of last year, 2022, adding that none of the other Eastern Caribbean Currency Union members have as yet to 2019 levels of production.
And we're grateful for that diversity in our economy, and we're hoping even as we move further into tourism that we maintain some level of diversity and not transition out of the areas on which we've traditionally relied for growth, but that we create linkages between those areas and tourism for future development.
Meanwhile, St. Vincent and the Grenadines Development Partners Coordination meeting, which sought to establish national priorities on existing programs being carried out by the government, was very important. Acting Prime Minister Montgomery Daniel said earlier this morning on NBC Radio that over the years, the United Nations agencies have been working well with St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
There are a number of examples that one can cite. You would have had tremendous work with PAHO. As you recall, even when there was the COVID attack. And outside of that, of course, the general response and the assistance that would have been given to this country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to help us to come out of that period of COVID.
Mr. Daniel said assistance has also been given in the area of agriculture. This country has also received tremendous support from the Food and Agriculture Organization.
I'm always intrigued by a particular result that came through from FAO working with the Ministry of Agriculture that I spearheaded between 2005, 2010 and beyond, where we were engaged in a number of nutritional programs using crops, and a number of school programs were established. And of course, by 2013, 2014, as I recall, the FAO recognized the tremendous work that we would have done here within the agricultural sector, to the extent that undernourishment was reduced to less than 5% in this country. A remarkable progress for a small country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And 17 students received assistance from the Basil Charles Foundation to pursue their educational aspirations at a ceremony held yesterday at Basil's Bar, located in Villa. 7 of the students received full scholarships, while 10 received bursaries. As part of the program, the awardees will receive financial assistance from Forms 1 to 5. Founder of the Basil Charles Educational Foundation, Basil Charles, said the foundation started almost 3 decades ago when he and one of his friends decided to host the Blues Festival on Mustique and on St. Vincent. He said they agreed to use the proceeds of the events to provide scholarships for economically disadvantaged students. Charles said they usually ask parents and guardians to provide them with information about their financial background, and then they select the children that they think are most needy, rather than just the students who have the best grades. Explaining how EC $15,000 scholarships is distributed, he said $600 is provided to the recipients in the first school term and $450 in the subsequent terms. Close to 2,000 children have received assistance from the foundation so far. The SVG Coalition of Churches will host a prayer for the nation on Monday, July 31st, from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening via Zoom. A statement released that the church vehemently condemns all forms of violence and is alarmed by the recent escalation of violence in this country. It further reads, "We encourage Vincentians to be peaceful. We wish to reiterate that as the Church, we will continue to promote and practice the biblical virtues of love, compassion, tolerance, restraint from vengeance, and forgiveness. Accepting and living by those godly values is a significant part of the solution to our crime problem. As a society, we must thoroughly evaluate the causes and collaborate to stem the tide of crime and violence. We urge our young men to lay down their weapons and abandon their destructive ways. Jesus says in Matthew 26, verse 52, "Put away your sword. Those who use the sword will die by the sword." As a nation, let us unite in prayer for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Let us entreat the Lord to restore our country so that tranquility may reign again from shore to shore. And those are the local stories. Continue watching on VC3 channel 114 to catch the regional and international news update, along with the VC3 Sports Update.